Hello, this is Lady Boulay, and welcome back to Black American Lineage. Thank you for your support. Thank you for all you do to support this channel. Today, as we journey through the past, I have another surprise for you. And that is that the man that invented the electric clothes dryer was a black man named George T. Sampson. This invention was done in 1892, so there's not a reliable picture of him. They're showing pictures of other inventors, but I do not believe that they have a picture of George T. Sampson, so I'm just going to use this silhouette of a black man to represent him. George T. Sampson was an African-American inventor, best known for inventing the automatic clothes dryer in 1892 and received a patent for it in 1893. Now we know how important it is for a black inventor to get a patent for his work, because if somebody's always standing in line prepared to take credit for what a black person does, no matter what it is. He also invented a propeller for a sled. In England and France, during the end of the 18th century, clothes dryers were being made. Called ventilators, these large contraptions were made of metal. The drum had ventilation holes in it that allowed heat into it while it was hand cranked over an open fire. This invention was used for decades. Sounds dangerous to me. As time moved on, America caught onto the idea of these ventilators. Unfortunately, the clothing consistently smelled of smoke, was covered in soot, and occasionally caught on fire during the drying process. Yeah. As you can imagine, this wasn't an ideal situation. So let's clarify. The Europeans called themselves inventing a clothes dryer that they had to crank over a fire. The clothes came out smelling like smoke and soot or soot. Sometimes we call it soot. And sometimes they caught on fire. Now, what kind of invention was that? That something was going to catch on fire, in addition to the fact that the clothes smelled worse coming out of the dryer than they did going into the dryer. So the question comes up, why did black people have to improve on so many white inventions? Now, my take on it is that the white people really didn't invent something. Because if you invented something that worked, nobody should have to go back and improve on it. And if it did need tweaking or improving, you ought to be the one to go back and improve on it. It shouldn't have to come from Europe to the United States for somebody who just came out of slavery to improve on it. There is no invention that a black person did where a white person had to go back and improve on it. So if somebody had to improve on it, you didn't invent anything. You rigged up a contraption. So in a case like this, where you're having to stand over a fire and hand crank a machine, and your clothes come out smelling like smoke and soot, and you might catch on fire in the process. That's not really a serious invention. That's a contraption. So when you say that a black person improved on something that a white person so-called invented, it's usually something dangerous that a white person came up with, that some type of a dangerous machine that a black person is going to have to operate. So that's how come black people have to go back and actually do the invention. They say improve on it, but the black person have to go back and fix it to make it workable, because so many of these white people's inventions didn't make any sense. Just like the elevator. Black people had to operate those elevators, and then those elevators came down and killed people. So a black man had to go back and invent automatic elevator doors to keep people from falling out of the elevator and the elevator coming down on them and killing them. So that is why. So, these people call themselves, so, sometimes an invention is really not an invention, it's an ideal. The invention then has to come from somebody else. Because if you come up with an idea and that idea is more destructive after you invented, so-called, than it was before, then you don't really have an invention. You have a dangerous contraption. So a little more about this inventor. According to Watch Cycle, George T. Sampson of Ohio decided that the ventilator invention needed to be tweaked. Instead of using heat from an open fire, he chose to place a rack over a stove. This heat source was much better as it didn't dirty the clothing or catch it on fire. On June 7th, 1892, Sampson was granted a patent for his idea. These dryers were used well into the 19th century until they figured out how to make a better model. But he had a model that actually worked and wasn't dangerous. Sampson's personal life, such as his childhood and education, is not very much documented and somewhat unknown. Even his birth date and location are disputed. However, Sampson was living in Dayton, Ohio, and had invented and patented a sled propeller, which brought him into public light in 1885. It was a pedal-powered device that made snow travel easier. So he had invented a snowmobile or something like that. But this whole idea about not knowing anything about him, you know what? For a black man in the United States in 1885, it's not hard to figure out his birth. He was probably born into slavery or right after. And so his family was scattered for the most part. He had no way of making a living. And as I said before, he was probably working with some of these dangerous contraptions, and just using common sense, he figured out it would be safer if we did it like this instead of doing it like that. So he probably didn't even have any formal education or very little formal education, but he used common sense to decide it's stupid to be standing over an open fire trying to crank something up to dry some clothes that's going to come out smelling like smoke and full of soot. You don't have to be a genius to figure out that was not a great invention. And the picture here that's shown is not George T. Sampson. This is Lewis Latimer of the light bulb invention. Every time they can't find a picture of a black inventor from back in the 1800s, they'll use Lewis Latimer's picture. But this is Lewis Latimer, it's not George T. Sampson. So 300 years of African American invention and innovation. See, we've been doing this now for 300 plus years in the United States, even though our inventors for the longest time were silenced. But no more. Everything in America is documented, and the truth eventually comes to the light. We are just beginning to uncover the history of African American technology, just beginning to understand its relation to the full story of American invention and innovation, and now finally seeing that these histories are intertwined from the start. Yes, they are. Enslaved Africans carried against their will to this country inevitably brought with them a store of technological knowledge, ways of doing things that they applied to the daily processes of life in this unfamiliar environment. Black people have been here since the earliest times, and despite the perception that they were merely a source of ignorant labor, they had an immediate impact on the technologies around them, applying traditional skills, creating some anew, and altering the nature of still other practices. In fact, the New World was a place where many different cultures and technologies met. To say that we were culturally diverse from the first is to say that our technologies were too. The point being that the enslaved people came from different areas of Africa, They all had ways of doing things, their culture, their technologies. The idea that these people were so dumb and that white people of all people had to teach them something is just laughable. So we are going beyond the indoctrination to actually learn what our people were doing in the United States from the beginning. They did not go into Africa getting a lot of dumb people. They went into Africa getting people that specialized in whatever it was they needed. And they did an excellent job. The only thing is white people have tried to take credit for everything that the enslaved people did, except picking cotton. So the technologies, the architecture, the agriculture, they brought the skills for applying those technologies with them. White people did not teach them how to do those things because they did not know how to do those things themselves. And I don't think we ever think to ask them, since you're so smart and you say you built a civilization, why were you going into Africa bringing people here against their will? Why were you doing that? They would have the world to think that they were teaching the enslaved people how to do that work, telling them what to do. Remember, you can't lead where you don't go, and you can't teach what you don't know. So anyway, we will continue to explore our history and our culture and learn the lessons that we need to know about ourselves. All right, y'all. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.